Hello and welcome to BayBrazil Annual Conference, edition number 9. Artificial intelligence has the potential to transform every industry sector in the world as we know it. While algorithms can help, they can also hurt humanity. Today, our guest speakers will unpack the controversial issues surrounding AI and give us the real scenario of AI's impact in the world. So, stick with us. It's great to have you for the first time. Our conference has been online. And before I invite our guest speakers to join us, I would like to introduce BayBrazil to some of you who are joining us today for the first time. Obrigada. I'll share here my screen. And just to give you a sense of what we've been doing at BayBrazil in this past 10 years. So this edition is a very important edition to us, very special, because last June we celebrate BayBrazil's 10th anniversary. To celebrate this milestone, we are expanding our annual conference into a series of online webinars that we've been putting together and discussing various sectors of the industries. Since mid-June, we've been hosting over 50 guests who are recapping the innovation path of Brazil and the US in this past decade and showcasing the major disruptions that will shape the next decade. I founded BayBrazil in 2010. At that time, Brazil's entrepreneurial community was starting to flourish. However, here in the San Francisco Bay Area, not only was no one talking about Brazil, but entrepreneurs, investors, tech leaders didn't know one another. So I founded BayBrazil to build the Brazilian American tech community in Silicon Valley and connect it with Brazil. One of the instruments we use to bring this community together is events such as the one you are joining, but this one, of course, for the first time is online only. But we've been doing events all over the Bay Area and gathering this community, and we started to build our tech hub from the ground up, one conversation at a time, one meeting at a time, one introduction at a time. Today, we have connected thousands. We are a community of over 15,000 people. We've organized over 150 both private and public events. And we've introduced over 100 Brazilian and American small and mid-sized business to enable meaningful dialogues and interactions. We also have been fostering entrepreneurship by connecting founders with mentors, with tech leaders, and with potential investors. We all know the economic challenges Brazil has faced. However, its entrepreneurial community continues developing, and BayBrazil is playing a role. In 2012, we launched BayBrazil Annual Conference at Stanford University. We gather founders, investors, and private sector leaders to engage in dialogues on the roles of Brazil and the US in the global economy. Not only we are presenting in-depth dialogues, but we are offering tech leaders the opportunity to learn, to meet one another and learn from one another. And also to learn from prominent founders such as Norman Winarski, co-founder of Siri, Brian Acton, co-founder of WhatsApp, and Mike Krieger, co-founder of Instagram, who was with us at Google in 2017. The latest in-person editions of our conference were at LinkedIn in San Francisco, and last year we were at SRI in Menlo Park. And we keep building and expanding our offerings to our community. Here are some of the programs we are developing for our partners and for tech leaders to engage in meaningful dialogues. We also have been interviewing dozens of leaders, both from Brazil and the US, to add inspiration and knowledge to our hub. Here, for example, is Nina Silva, the founder of Movimento Black Money, who is supporting entrepreneurship in the Brazilian Black community. And also Peter Norvig, for example, who is referencing AI and is the AI research director at Google. BayBrazil is proud to partner with key players, both in Silicon Valley and in Brazil, who are committed to strengthening our bilateral hub. Our BayBrazil's board of directors embodies a cross-section of Brazilian American executives residing in the Bay Area and in Brazil, who are having the pleasure to work with to grow our organization and shape our organization. And today we are discussing, so for the past several weeks, we've been discussing topics such as the innovation economy, both of the US and Brazil. And today we are shifting here to the impact of artificial intelligence. For that, we invited an authority in this topic, that is Jur Leskovac. Jur, are you there? Jur Leskovac is joining us from Slovenia. Hi, Yuri.
Hi, everyone.
Great to have you. Yuri is chief scientist at Pinterest, associate professor of computer science at Stanford University, and an investigator at Chain Zuckerberg BioHub. He was the co-founder of a machine learning startup, Correa, which was acquired by Pinterest. Yuri's research applications include common sense reasoning, social networking analysis, and computational social science, part of what we will be discussing here today. To moderate this conversation, we invited Thamila Zaher. Hello, Thamila. Hi, Thamila. Thamila is the executive director of Grupo SEB, Education Brazilian System, the largest K-12 private group in Brazil, with over 80,000 students. Thamila works in education for over 10 years and launched 3 innovative initiatives recently. Escolas Concept, which I visit in São Paulo, is amazing. Connexia, and recently Maple Bear Global. Welcome, Yuri. Welcome, Thamila. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'll pass the ball to you.
Thank you, Margarise. Let me get this ball. So I'll just, Yuri, thank you very much. So we have a little chat about your work. I would like to warm up our talk, and I would like you to just talk briefly for everyone what you can say about the news about AI, and like an overview of your research, of your observations, and how the business across the world are applying AI.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the question. So what I do and what my research group at Stanford, and then also what I do at Pinterest, is really around thinking about how do we learn from complex data. And what I mean by that is that present deep learning toolkit essentially is able to process two types of data really well. It can process sequential data, so linear sequences, which is basically text and speech. And we know how to process fixed size matrix data, which is images. But if you think about kind of real world data, real world applications, they have much more complex types of data, relational data, where there are dependencies and relations between different entities in the data. And we are basically pioneering building machine learning, deep learning algorithms that allow us to learn on complex data, meaning graph data, knowledge graph data, social network data, and so on. And then applications of this, as you said, range very broadly from common sense reasoning AI to large-scale recommender systems, which is what I do at Pinterest. And then it also leads, for example, to drug design, medicine, and biology, which is part of what I'm doing with Chan Zuckerberg Biohub Institute.
Perfect. Thank you for that. When I read about your work and learned more about what you do, a few reflections came. So there was the talk about humans and machine competing for space in the workforce in the future. But in your talks, you're constantly empathize about the different role machines and humans you play. May you elaborate more on how the future will require humans to focus on more complex tasks, while the machine support us with the intelligent automation and the judgment?
Yeah, thank you. We have been doing a lot of work in my research group at Stanford University, thinking, demonstrating how humans and machines can collaborate and work together. And we have two research projects that we did. One was in thinking about how could machine learning be used to help criminal court judges to make better decisions who to put in jail and who to release free. The interesting question there is, how would you build a machine learning algorithm that would make predictions that are useful for the judge, and this way allow the judge to make more accurate decisions. And then the second project we are actually currently working on relates to how can AI, machine learning, help medical doctors make better decisions. We have developed a system that leads to much better quality and standard of care across the people of different socioeconomic and racial backgrounds. What we found out as a consequence is that a lot of medical training is done on very biased data sets, right? And if you train human doctors on a biased data set, the diagnosis they do on general population sometimes might be biased. So machines here can come and help, and in some sense serve as an additional input to the human doctor making a decision.
So with this being said, are you saying that without the bias that the machines can bring to the development in the decisions and what we do, in this when we think about that, are you saying that probably more than 50 or 7% what we do now as humans will change to the machine, or do you think that it will be like a complementary thing to do?
I think it's very complementary. The way I see it is the following: is that humans will focus kind of on more higher level tasks, and machines are in some sense really good at doing pattern recognitions. So for example, in the medical case, right, a certain doctor in his or her lifetime can only examine or make a certain number of diagnoses. Machine learning algorithm can learn from all the doctors and everything. The same is with criminal court judges. A certain criminal court judge can only go through a certain number of cases over in a year. The second important thing, for example, in these domains is that it is very hard for humans to get feedback. So a medical doctor may get some feedback, but sometimes they send the patient onward, and then it's hard for them to get a feedback. How did something go? If, for example, if they are a surgeon who do an operation and then they discharge the patient, right? Or if a judge decides to put someone in jail, again, it's unclear, like the judge doesn't get feedback for a few years whether that was about that, right? So here I see an opportunity for AI algorithms that go over huge amounts of data to really learn. On the other end, I see also an opportunity for humans who can think much more holistically to contribute and at the end make decisions with the input or with the help of these machines that can kind of collect, analyze very large amounts of data.
Perfect. And when you think about that, so when we are thinking about the pattern, so we are looking backwards because we are looking in the past, right? What we've done and what are the patterns that we've been seeing. How do you think that AI will evolve with the social evolution? So do you have a gap here? So we've been based in the judges, right? So we've been basing our decisions for our social role, right? That we have now. But if you just get the patterns, how can you get the AI to help not to lose the future, the view of the future of the evolution of the society?
I mean, I think of course, perhaps what is here to say is that as what we are in some sense realizing, and this is now, which is and I think it really brings people from various different disciplines together, is that the algorithms, the technology is not developed and used in kind of in isolation or by itself from the society to which it is part of. And this is, I think, very important because it means that there is a lot of collaboration and dialogue needed between technologists and, let's say, social scientists, public policy people, even philosophers, ethics, and so on, right? So these communities are coming together, which is very important. Another thing that is important is that we are also realizing and building tools how to diagnose robustness of, let's say, AI systems, how to make sure that AI systems don't discriminate, are unbiased, both in thinking about how do we build such systems, as well as how do we verify them that they won't make, in some sense, wrong or outrageous decisions in some sense. So there is a lot of new research questions or a new frontier is opening as these algorithms are getting more widely used. How do we, in some sense, verify them? How do they explain and give explanation for certain decisions they make? How do we make sure that an algorithm won't just, I don't know, if it's a self-driving car, won't just say, oh, let's turn left and hit a wall or things like that, right? So there is a lot, I think, that is happening right now in this area. But I think the most important thing is to realize that these algorithms, systems are not separate out of society, but are kind of part, in some sense, of our everyday lives. And as such, they need to be designed and treated with all the, let's say, societal consequences they have. So this is a very holistic problem, and it's not just a computer science or a technology problem.
Perfect. It will prevent us in the future to get the same errors, right? So in connecting to that, what you said, and with your response, can you elaborate more in what is your view of the roles in this about schools and university? How can they prepare the students with this scenario with the AI, what do you think would be the best fit to just get people on market? You know how hard it is to get people to understand AI because the schools and university, they don't take care about codes and language. What you're thinking about the future?
I think the way I would say it is, in some sense, computer scientists need more non-computer science education, and non-computer scientists need more computer science education. And the reason why I'm saying this is, for example, what is happening at Stanford University is that basically every student of Stanford University enrolls into computer science courses. So basically every student, whether they study English or they study history, they take 1 or 2 computer science courses, not by design, but by choice. So this means that our students realized through the freedom they have in choosing the subjects that computer science is part of how to say, of their knowledge, of their alphabet, regardless of what they are doing. And I think this is very important because they learn, they write some code, they learn what technology can do, they learn what it cannot do, they learn how things work, they know when to trust them, when not to trust them. That I think is very important. At the same time, how we are changing the computer science, the education, is to include much more discussion, much more kind of social science into them, human-centered design, ethics, and really get the students thinking about that they are not just building technology, but also building technology that is used by people and that affects people. And this is how, for example, Stanford University transformed its education to prepare people for the future.
Perfect. I would change a little bit the subject now, so I'll talk more about your work in Pinterest, if that's okay. So our ancestor used image caves to, for example, represent historical stuff and even to inspire themselves, right? I see like Pinterest as a different social network than others. Can you share when you think about how people are increasing their inspiration and they are producing concept like this? How do you write this language in the present for the future? How do you think that it will affect our communication and business model with this representative stuff, more symbolical? And I know that you talk about that, so can you elaborate more about this?
Yeah, so I would say the way we think of Pinterest, we don't really think of it as a classical social network or a social media application where you come and post, content, pictures, whatever. Pinterest is really kind of the opposite. It's a place where people come to search for ideas. So in some sense, Pinterest is a discovery engine. It's almost like a search engine for things that are very hard to describe with 3 words, right? If in some sense Google is a search engine for things that you can describe with 3 words, Pinterest is kind of a visual search engine for ideas, right? And the use cases that people use it for is a lot around furnitures, home decoration, fashion, food and cooking, all kinds of hobbies, travel, and so on, where basically you come to Pinterest where you have some project, some idea in mind, but you don't know how to describe it. It's like you want to buy a chair that looks in a certain way. It is impossible to write a Google query to say, oh, I want a chair exactly like this. But once you see a couple of chairs, you say, aha, this is what I like, this type of thing I want to buy, show me more similar things. And this is what Pinterest, machine learning, AI engines that we have developed are really good at understanding how these different pieces of content, these different images, how they relate to each other and how they are similar or different and in what aspects. And this means that we allow people to really visually search and find things that they like, that they would like to do, that they would like to build, cook, buy, and so on. So what this means is that people come to Pinterest with some very rough idea what they would like to do, and then we build recommender engines that kind of take them from that very rough idea through a series of steps down to the action they take, which is, for example, they cook a dinner because they came to find a good recipe. They perhaps, I don't know, get a haircut if they came there to see what kind of haircut they would like to have. Or perhaps buy something online because they found out what kind of chair they want. So we try to do this connection. And of course, because people go through these types of processes, we also are able to model and understand how one hobby leads to the next hobby, right? Like how, for example, if you are new to something, you want to recommend different things when you become an expert. And these types of things, these kind of journeys and this kind of intent, motivation creation, we can do and model. And of course, that leads then to kind of e-commerce and so on.
Perfect. So when you think about the future, so humans will have to be more creative and all those things, right? Because the AI will change the perspective about the data. So you basically are saying that the Pinterest, they're much more in the future because they're getting the different way of communicate and helping people to create new stuff, being inspired about the language and the visual stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think Pinterest is interesting. It's one of the, when we do or when organizations do user surveys, it's one of the applications that actually increases the happiness of users, and people who use it are very happy because it is kind of, rather than being in a social network where you are trying to impress your followers and you are under this constant pressure, how are you going to impress your followers? Pinterest is kind of, you look into yourself and say, what that I want to do? How do I want to spend my day? What are my hobbies? And this means that it is not a kind of public open space. In some sense, it's more like a private space where everyone can kind of curate their own hobbies, things they like, things that inspire them. So, and as we build more better and more AI tools, here in particular kind of visual discovery type technology, we hope we can let people discover these things faster, more seamlessly, and not just discover them, but also then lead them to action. So to actually do something in their outside world because of something that they saw in the app.
Perfect. And I think I'll pump up the last question, Margarise. Can I have the last question? Because I'm getting the time out, so I'm just a little worried about the timing. Is that okay if I get one more question?
Thamila. Go ahead.
Okay. So Yuri, in a complex world, when you see that we have to inspire, we have to create more, the AI, they're getting much more complex data and get simple. How do you think that the design of these new algorithms with those inspiration language, with this new kind of creative visual stuff, how do you think that it will change the role of the sectors in the society? So do you think that they will have an impact on that, or do you think that they will get used to and used as a tool?
I think it's a bit of both, right? Like in some sense, the digital transformation across all the industries is real, and the kind of the coronavirus only accelerated that, right? So that trend is only accelerating. So I think the future is even more digital. It's even more online. It's even more kind of cyber, physical, virtual, if you like. So I think where things will go is, how do you connect the online with the offline? How do you build applications, services that allow you in some sense to get ready online, and then connect them to offline. And at the same, similarly in the other way, right? Like if I'm if I see a shoe my friend has, I should be able to take a picture of that, find it, I don't know, on Amazon or Pinterest, and just go buy it, right? So like building, I think these bridges will become even more important. And that's one thing. So it's really about sensing the kind of the physical world with this kind of online connection.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Margarise, I think I just jumped like 8 or 7 questions.
Yuri.
Yes.
Yuri, you just mentioned how much more digital our lives have become. Do you see an AI-driven world where that we won't intrude in our privacy?
That is an excellent question, and I think I think things are going in the right direction, right? Like with the GDPR, it was a very important step. Now, for example, steps that Apple is doing are also I think good for consumer, and of course, I think companies will have to adopt to these new realities and certain practices that perhaps were allowed in the past and were questionable or were harming user privacy. Those things won't work anymore. So it like the future, I think, or the trend, I think, is definitely in the respecting user privacy more, not less. Right? Like if I just gave you kind of 2 examples that show I think a very good trajectory from the user point of view, or from the point of view of respecting user or people's privacy.
But you see businesses concerned about not intrude their privacy. Do you realize that in your day-to-day work?
Yeah, I mean, yes. If GDPR forced businesses in one way, I think now Apple with tracking will is another step where Apple demonstrated clearly, and it will have huge consequences. At Pinterest, we are very, in some sense, I would say, conservative in a sense of, or very respectful of users' privacy. We don't track users across the web and things like that, right? So there is a lot, I think, companies are doing, and I think more of that is happening because people are realizing that perhaps things have gone too far.
Well, it's been fascinating, Yuri. We have so many more questions. We just can hope that you're going to be able to join us back in the future. Congrats on your work. Much success. Thank you. Thamila, thank you for joining us. Lots of a good reflection for the education world here. Lots of inspiration. Thank you so much, and all the best to you both.
Thank you. All the best to Brazil.
Thank you. Thank you very
Ciao.
much.
Well, now we are entering the second part of our event today. And with that, I want to bring here Anderson Tez, Managing Director of RedPoint Ventures. Hello, Anderson. Anderson is joining us from São Paulo. Anderson is the co-founder and managing director of RedPoint Ventures, the first Brazilian VC fund sponsored by Silicon Valley firms. Previously, Anderson was the CEO of Apontador, the leading local search and geolocation company in Brazil, and an investment principal at Naspers. It's so good to have you, Anderson. And I must say that your main role, of course, after all these that I just mentioned, is being a BayBrazil board member. So good to have you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Margarise. Really honored to be here. Congratulations again for the great work that you are doing over the last 10 years for Brazil and the Bay Area with BayBrazil. It has been a great honor to be part of the board and see how much you've done in the last few years. So thank you for the invitation. Thank you for letting me in the board, and congratulations for the great event that we are pulling different fashion this way this year, but very, very interesting as well. A lot of very good content coming.
Yeah, it's been challenging to move it to online, Anderson, but the good thing about this is so everybody misses the interaction, the face-to-face meetings, but what has been good is that these dialogues are reaching way more people that we usually could not be here with us in Silicon Valley. So that's the silver lining of everything. And thank you so much for all your support. I've had the honor to have amazing people like you helping me in this path. And thanks for bringing Marcelo. Let's bring Marcelo, and I'll let you to introduce Marcelo. I'll just say a few words. Hey, Marcelo.
Hi, how are you?
We met 2 years back when you were leading the 21-21-2 accelerator. So Marcelo Salles, is a pleasure to have you here for the first time in our conference. Marcelo not only is a serial entrepreneur, and he just brought his new company from R&D for several years and stealth mode to public, and the name is Cyberlas.ai, his new company that just announced 5 million Series A fund led by Redpoint. Congrats, Marcelo.
Thank you very much.
Congrats, Anderson, for the new addition to the portfolio. Good to have you.
Thank you so much, Margarise. Great pleasure. So we're going to be talking today here. It's actually a continuation pretty much from the first part of the conversation with Yur from Pinterest, with Thamila. I was checking out here. I'm not sure if Yur is still around, but I can definitely back what he said. I'm a happy customer from Pinterest since 2012. And nice coincidence here. I tried to join in January, and I got waitlisted, and I got approved to Pinterest on the day of my birthday, March 25th of 2012. And it has been a great experience. It's a very interesting social network, and one of the first that I let my daughters join in. They are now 11 and 14, and it's a safe and very interesting. It's a great company. We're going to be talking a little bit more about AI. I'm super happy in many ways. I'll start dropping a few comments from my nerd side, which I share with Marcelo. He'll definitely detail his a lot more. But I looked up. AI is actually pretty old discipline. It's if you look up on the internet, it says early signs of AI or early research dates back to 1956, and the internet from 1960. So AI is actually older than the internet. But it was with the evolution of the internet, with cheaper storage and cheaper computing, that we ended up having this latest boom in AI. And it's very timely, a lot of things happening. And, I at Redpoint, and my personal belief as well is that it's going to be as pervasive as the internet itself. So in a few years or 1 decade, it's going to be pretty much everywhere. So it's very good that we have people like you, Marcelo, kicking it off in Brazil. I would like you first to introduce a little bit about your background. Tell us a little bit about your journey to here, and then later we'll talk a little bit about Cyberlabs and how we got here. But I'll give you a lead way. Margarise mentioned that you are a serial entrepreneur. I love the fact that you are also a serious entrepreneur, right? So it's not like you did 20 things until you found something. You built things for a long time and succeeded. So it would be great if you could share the story with the audience here today.
Okay, yeah. But first, I'm a nerd, right? I'm a computer engineer. I'm a nerd. I love what I do. I love to study. I love to code. And when I started, like in 2000, me and Fabrício, when we started Movili, there was the environment in Brazil was a kind of rush, right? It was like no VCs, no. Oh my God, I don't know. There was no ecosystem at all. So at the same time, there was nothing that we were like, okay, we just want to create products that we would love to use. And so we developed a whole set of products. We create a lot of new services for carriers and mobile phones. And it took like 10 years, right, to reach some size. And in 2010, I looked back and I saw like, oh my God, it was so hard for nerd to start a business by itself in this environment in Brazil. And Brazil in 10 years had evolved so much, right? We were like, okay, now people know what entrepreneurship means. People know what a startup means, but was still there, still was like a really hard path. So I decided to start a new business, which was 2122 Accelerator. And basically we saw iCombinator in San Francisco. We said, okay, this is great. This is a way that we can help young entrepreneurs. And maybe we can teach them a few things like how do you pitch investors? How do you build scalable softwares? How do you deal with legal, right? Which is like tricky because if you're a nerd, you usually don't like to read contracts and this kind of things. And then we created the accelerator from 2010 to 2015. We had like 56 companies that we invested. We evaluated more than 6,000 companies through that process, which was really good. And at 2015, we had our first exit, which was a 20x return, which was good at the time. And then I said, okay, I think we did our job.
It's still great today. Come on.
We had better numbers from the portfolio today, but on 2015 was like really good. And I said, okay, guys, now I think we did our work for the ecosystem in Brazil, because in 5 years, there was like this huge explosion of accelerators, VCs, and the whole market was like, oh, we need innovation, so we need to hire some startup to bring new products to our business. And that was, I think we had the feeling that the job was done for the proposal of like helping the ecosystem. And then we said, I decided to, okay, guys, I'm gonna take a sabbatical year, and I'll try to think about the next things that I would love to do. And if you are a nerd, you need to study, right, in your sabbatical year. So I decided to move to Europe and just to start. And then I started studying robotics, and I built a robot. I started like I was like, okay, 3D printers is good. So I bought a lot of 3D printers. The good things when you have some cash is that you can buy a lot of toys. So I bought a lot of toys in this type of thing. I was like calling China and say, hey, I want this and this hardware. I just want to test it. And then I realized that AI was something that would change the world. And I was like, oh my God, this is really powerful. And when I started to researching about AI, machine learning, deep learning, I said, oh, I need to really understand this subject. So my journey was to started studying a lot just because I was on vacation, right? And because I was on vacation, I started reading papers from researchers, and I realized that not a lot of people send email to researchers. So I started sending email to all the researchers that thought that was interesting and say, hey, can we schedule a coffee? I read your paper, I have some questions. And through that process, I created a lot of friends, and I decided to travel at the beginning of 2016, I decided to travel the world, trying to meet some entrepreneurs who were like doing some interesting things with AI. And especially in China, I went to Shenzhen. I met a lot of friends over there. And then I went to the United States, in New York, in San Francisco. And then I said, okay, so I could see a lot of people building AIs to solve local problems, right? So that was the key thing, was like the Chinese were like building face recognition for Chinese. They were like doing voice recognition. In the United States, there was a lot of interesting researchers doing a lot of really good things, especially in Google, Facebook, and Amazon, and Microsoft also. So I said, okay, but who is doing research in Brazil? And you need to, if you want to build a great AI, you need to like train for a specific problem. You need to train with like your local data. Otherwise, you're gonna have a solution that's not gonna fit very well your environment. And I started like calling my friends in Brazil saying, hey, who is doing research in AI? And that was a complete silence. I was like, oh my God, this is disturbing, because Brazilians need to learn how to solve their own problems, and we need local researchers. And so that was like, I think the first movement was to start like selecting professors, great professors, who had like great students trying to do some research. And I started like approaching them and said, hey, what if I give you like real problems and you do research based on real data for Brazilian problems, and I'll give you like a scholarship, right? And then I discovered that in Brazil, if you want to study to be get a master's degree or a PhD, you cannot work for a company. So I said, okay, this is tricky. How can I give them a scholarship and at the same time be I don't know, be aligned with like all the interests? So I discovered that I can actually provide them scholarships if I just give the data and the path, and then they are not working for my company. They are just doing the research. But through that, once they completed the research, I can actually take this research and implement in a product. And through that process, we started providing a lot of scholarships. It was like today is $250,000 a year that we provide. So this was good. And at the beginning of 2017, I decided to come back to Brazil, and I started building Cyberlabs. So the first thing I did was like calling my friends, all the developers I know, which I've been working with. And then I said, okay, guys, let's build another company, but this time it's going to be a company that we want to teach AI. We want to translate AI to the common knowledge and through products. And to do that really well, we need to have like a stream of researchers doing a lot of research in Brazilian problems, right? And we have a lot of problems in Brazil, right? So there was also, I think, the marriage between the academy and the business entrepreneurs, because finally, like, you can have alignment between those interests. The academy wants to be the best in the world and publish a paper and win some prizes and be recognized about the innovation they created. And now we can actually take that and put on production right away. So the first things we decided to attack was face recognition. Because of Brazilian diversity, you cannot take an face recognition that you can find in the internet and put on production, you're gonna have bias. So we have to create like a lot of, so actually I had a first client that was an airport, an international airport. And that client was that they want to monitor how many people were on the line of the boarding. And then I said, okay, but can I take these faces and use these faces to train my algorithm? So I took like 13 million Brazilian faces from different angles. And then I had to balance and create a network without the racial bias. So we were like doing this research for 3 years and was successful outcome from that. And after phase, we still improve our network every day. But after phase, we also did like a voice recognition, voice speech to text, text to speech, and voice DNA. So you can identify anyone. If you hear 10 seconds of a voice, you can identify anyone. So I think this new endeavor of Cyberlabs is to first try to solve some of our problems through AI, but try to make AI easy for people to use and not be scared of. I think that's the whole thing behind Cyberlabs construction. And this is the beginning. So 2020 was the first year we decided to announce and get off the stealth mode. We had many clients, of course, but that was the first year. So it's the first year of Cyberlabs in doing products to
out in the light. Yeah, it is. No, it is great what you guys have been doing. We've been talking from the beginning. It was actually quite pioneering in Brazil and globally, actually. When you started studying, it was before, obviously, as I mentioned, it's a 60-year-old technology, but this whole buzz behind AI and the adoption by different companies and so on is happening more in the last few years. You started before it was spoken about globally, but especially in Brazil. And one of the interesting things we found from Redpoint, looking at what you are building, is this nice mix, because it's a mission that is very dear to you, very clear, that you want beyond building a great company, which is from a fiduciary perspective is what allow us to invest. There is this very genuine wish to make sure Brazil doesn't miss this boat, right?
Yeah.
It's something important. It's something, so the way Cyberlabs is looking at the whole opportunity goes beyond the company's border, and it goes from the way you are dealing with data, the way you are dealing with talent, the way you are dealing with technology, using best practices and competing at a global level. So we're going to bring new guests to the conversation in a minute. I just wanted to ask you, for us to wrap up on the more Cyberlabs part of the talk, what is your aim? What is your goal for Cyberlabs and the AI market in Brazil, at least as a first step?
So Brazil has a lot of issues about security and trust, right? And one of the problems we are attacking right now is to create a digital identity of Brazilians in a way that you can trust someone who is getting access to your building, or you can trust that the person who is putting the credit card is the person who is actually want to buy something over there, is the real person, is not a fraud. And because of the fraud and the trust and security issue in Brazil, I think Brazilians pays a lot of over taxes or overpriced in a lot of services. And we said, okay, how can we solve this problem using AI? So we developed an app. It's a key app. It's your key. And basically the app is is trying to democratize AI in a way that everybody has a voice, everybody has a face. So you can use your face, your voice to open doors, to buy things, to prove that you are yourself, or to even sign a contract if you want to, right? So now I think that our main goal is to digitalize 200 million Brazilians. That's the main goal. And at the same time, generate like thousands and thousands of jobs, not only on Cyberlabs, but people who actually gonna learn this new technology, and through that gonna create new services, new things, and generate more jobs. So my main goal is not only to translate AI in easy products, but also to teach and spread AI knowledge through Brazilians. I think that's what again, I'm a nerd, so I want to talk to young nerds and make them like create new things. That's
fantastic. Which is a perfect way to bring in our other guests here. So I would like to welcome Constance from Ashoka and José Mauro from Pinheiro Neto. Constance, if you could please just introduce yourself, talk a little bit about the job you do at Ashoka, and then we will enter into a little bit more on the topic that Marcelo just mentioned after José Mauro introduced himself as well.
Of course, thank you for having me, Anderson, and everyone here. It's a pleasure. And I'm dialing in from Washington, D.C., where I'm based. I'm originally German. I immigrated to the U.S. 5 years ago. And I work with Ashoka. We are a global nonprofit organization that is supporting social entrepreneurs around the world, which we define as, you know, men and women with pattern changing solutions to social problems. And I am doing many things with Ashoka, but one thing is I'm sort of really invested in the tech and humanity field. So I'm looking from a bird's eye perspective at our social entrepreneurs who are using technology to solve a social problem, or who are working on getting the fundamentals of technology right. And I'm trying to read out patterns and trends and insights. And I'm looking forward to sharing some of that in a minute. So it's basically about sort of what you guys were referring to before, sort of how tech is embedded and interacts with society.
Fantastic. We're gonna dig on that in a minute. And José Mauro, if you could introduce yourself a little bit as well, then we are gonna start our ping pong.
Hi, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here. Anderson, Constance, Marcelo. And Marcelo, congratulations for the company, for Cyberlabs. It's so great to hear stories like this, inspiring stories from Brazilians making new things and things that can be a paradigm to the world. So it's really nice. Thank you for sharing your story. So I'm a lawyer in Brazil, in São Paulo. I'm a partner in the technology area in Pinheiro Neto. I spent some years in California, in Stanford, taking my LLM degree. It was great to see those big companies getting really reaching an international level, such as Facebook, Uber. It was a really interesting time to be there. And then I came back to Brazil and I started to work with technology, and then that wave came straight to Brazil. It was a great economical moment. We got a lot of new interesting clients, new jobs, new things to do. So I've been working with technology since then, since I came back to Brazil 12 years ago. And I've been working not only with big techs, but also with startups like the one Marcelo just shared with us. So this is what I've been doing here. And again, it will be really nice to join this conversation.
Thank you so much, everyone. I just want to remind the audience that please do send your questions. I have a couple here already. I'm not gonna save all of them to the end. We're gonna bring them in. I'm just not asking them now because we're going to be talking about this topic in a minute. But please do participate and please do send your questions because it will make the experience much better for everyone, including our panelists here. Thank you all for being here, for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us. First item I had on our agenda is something that it's very, very often raised in the very beginning of conversations around AI, and not a coincidence, it popped already in the conversation between Yuri and Thamila before, which is what this new technology that's getting pervasive in all industries is going to do with the jobs. So what are the jobs that are going to disappear? Which types of jobs are going to be created? We can talk a little bit about that. They did already a little bit. I also would like to pick on the expertise of the panelists to go one step further, which is what should we be doing today to make sure we enjoy the benefits and manage the negatives of this new wave that is certain to come. So if you could start us on that, Constance, I think it's part of your sweet spot. So
thank you.
If you could kick it off.
Yeah, happy to do so. And I mean, in a nutshell, yes, jobs will go away, repetitive jobs will go away, but others will come. And so there is something to be said about what does that mean for the larger, let's say, tectonic shifts that we are going to see. And I come back to that in a minute. I wanted to start with just a conversation I recently had with one of our fellows, because I think it shows the layers of complexity that we are dealing with, you know, when we are talking about AI taking jobs away. And the social entrepreneur I was talking with was Stephen Friend. He's the founder of Sage Bionetworks. He worked with Apple and healthcare, and he founded another startup recently. And they're looking at wearables and predictive medicine. So in other words, what does the technology tell you, or the machine tell you about your body? And as you know, many of you know, what is fascinating is that the more we understand about the molecular levels of what is happening in our body, the more we are able to make predictions about chronic diseases, for instance, the onset of chronic diseases, when a flare is likely to happen. But also we can give each of us, you know, a more and more individualized picture about, you know, what is happening. And so that has huge implications on, for instance, the profession of doctors, you know, because you could argue that the machine will know way more than the doctor with their old AI, i.e. their brain and what they learned in medical school, you know, and their own biases and their own sort of limitations. So there will be a major shift happening. But then the other interesting thing is, as machines will tell us more and more about, you know, our own body and our health into the future, there's the big question, so what do we then do with that knowledge? And that is where, you know, other professions come in. For instance, you might want to have, you know, a nurse, a social worker, a friend, you know, a coach who tells you what to do with the fact that you're likely to get diabetes, you know, unless you change your lifestyle. So, you know, it's not just that manual jobs and simple manual jobs will get away, but also sort of complicated jobs, sophisticated jobs will go away and will change. And community will perhaps matter more, not less. So that is one interesting thing I'm seeing. Then to get back more into the overall pattern, like how do you as society deal with that? I mean, one thing we are seeing is the question of participation. So what do you do with those who are getting disenfranchised or getting pushed out of jobs? What is interesting, for instance, is that Singularity University, they are working, one of my former colleagues there, she's working with the farmers union in the US and sort of engaging farmers basically in the design and constructions of robots that are going to sort of plow the fields and plant seeds. So, you know, bringing those who know most right now into the construction of the future is something really interesting. And then there is the question, I mean, you've probably read about it, heard about it, you know, sort of what happens from a bird's eye perspective if we are in danger, let's say, and Harari wrote about this, of creating a new class of people who are sort of irrelevant in the new economy, right? And the digital economy, because they cannot play and they are also not really needed to create wealth. And there, what I think is interesting is that we are seeing how social entrepreneurs are thinking about how we can share, what are new models to share productivity gains with everyone. And one experiment, for instance, is a organization in Spain. They're called Spot Lab, led by Miguel Luengo. They are, what they're doing is they are, so based on the model that when you help train an AI, for instance, let's say patients and doctors train an AI that's going to make, you know, medical diagnostics and prediction, is it possible to compensate them every time that AI gets used later on? So can you use, for instance, the Spotify model and, you know, pay out royalties so that it's not like a winner takes it all model, but, you know, those who contribute to creating it have a stake in it. So it's an interest, I'm mentioning it here because I think the larger question we need to tackle is what do we do about, you know, wealth, and this is also where universal basic income comes in and other models, you know, how do we ensure that we can redistribute the gains to more than just the ones who own, you know, an algorithm.
Which is a great point, because there is a lot of AI, a lot of tech and algorithms in AI, which is part of what you mentioned as well, this very training. And there is also a lot of data, right? There is the ownership or the copyright of you're using my data to learn. Am I entitled, or should I be entitled to participate in the value that is being created or not? It's a great question for sure. If we could just pick for a second the same subject of job creation, infrastructure, problem solving from a global level and bring it to the reality of Brazil. If you, Marcelo and José Paulo, José Mauro can comment on how do you see these interplay in Brazil, where we are, what we should be doing in Brazil and eventually other emerging markets to, you know, endure and benefit from these I love this tectonic shift from AI.
Anderson, I like to see things in short, medium, and long terms, right? So I think, like, of course, we're gonna have automation of some jobs in the short term, but think about think in a different dimension here. We're gonna be able to create AIs that are gonna teach people in a way better way that how we learn it, right? We took like 5 years to do a university. Maybe in a few years, we can do a 5-year university in like 3 months, because you're gonna have an AI that's gonna know how do you learn the exactly atomic way that you need to learn to increase a skill. So what I like to see, the perspective I like to see, let's look also from the benefits that we can actually make a leapfrog in a country like Brazil, right? Brazil has a lot of places that AI can actually make it a huge improvement in the quality of life, in health, in education, in security, in trust, in logistic. Oh my God, logistic is so easy. We have some clients that when we put some AI on their logistic, they said like, oh my God, this is like you're cutting a third of my cost just using this algorithm every day. So I really like to see the bright side. So this is my point on when we're talking about AI. And I totally think that we need to have an open dialogue with lawyers, with like politicians, with like all the industries about not only the risk, but the opportunities that we can create here. I just wanted to share this because I think this is super important, especially with José Mauro, because he's a lawyer, right? And this is being on the table right now. Everybody's discussing this. Okay, so I think it's a nice sign.
You know, Marcelo, I'm optimistic as well. I tend to see things in a good way. Jobs will disappear. Some jobs eventually will disappear, and this is for sure. Constance mentioned the Harari book, and it's so interesting to read about the possibilities. And I think many repetitive jobs, more clerical functions will disappear. You know, I took a course a few years back, and this course, one of the papers that we had to present was focused in our firm, in our company. We should identify all the jobs that would disappear. And in my reality, for example, trainees, eventually they will not be necessary. When I first started to work here in Pinheiro Neto, I would spend an afternoon reading books and trying to find precedents. It would take a long time. It was very boring, I have to say. And it was not very reliable because I was a student, and sometimes I would miss a page. I wouldn't be so, you know, attentive to details and things like that. And today, if you perform something like this with any computer, it's really fast, it's really cheap, and you can do in seconds. So I think in all companies, we will need to deal with the disappearance of these kinds of jobs. But I just want to remember that if this premise that jobs will disappear and we will lose as a society, if this was true, the peak of employment would be just before Industrial Revolution. And this is not true, right? I mean, things got better, we got more jobs, and society is much better off. So I'm optimistic. I think that things will get much better. The only thing is that we will need to rely on governments and companies to help society as a whole to overcome this moment. And my concern regarding Brazil is specific because this can increase inequality. So people with less access to education, less access to reskilling, these people may suffer a lot. So we really need a plan. It would be nice to have a government focusing on this kind of in these people in order to make it as smooth as possible, to provide the necessary education, to provide the necessary assistance, because otherwise people that have access to education will be better off, and these people will be much worse, and inequality will increase. So my concern regarding Brazil is only this, that this could drive into an increase of inequality.
Yeah, if I go ahead, Marcelo.
Oh, sorry, but Jose, you're totally right. But if you think AI actually gonna help to bring help to the people who actually needs. So let me give a small example. I have a company that we invested in, SpadMed, which do a app for doctors. But inside country, you don't have specialists, right? You imagine someone in a city that has only 10,000 people, and he's the generic doctor, right, over there. But now, with the help of AI, he can actually see some disease, some kind of specific behavior, and he can actually analyze which kind of disease is this and give a better treatment over there. Also, credit. We pass through credit right now, and AI was the one who was selecting which person needed most, and which one is a fraud who doesn't need because he's a public employee, this kind of thing. So we need to always see the two dimensions of this.
Yeah, I'm also on the optimistic side, and I'm going to make a very cynical comment here. In the job creation and job destruction that it's so much on the news now, this destruction in the case of AI is much more democratic. So we, in many ways before, since the Industrial Revolution, as you well mentioned, Jose Mauro, we saw a lot of jobs being destroyed, right? In agriculture, in repetitive work, in the cities, and so on, and so factories. And society somehow absorb that and manage that, oftentimes in not the most positive way. What I think is new now with AI is that we're going to be destroying, and I emphasize the word destroying on purpose, high-paying jobs. So I think these will bring light to the job destruction that always happened with a much more emphasis. The reason is not noble, but I think the consequence will be very positive. So we're going to be looking at how to readjust the reality of people that get displaced with their jobs get displaced with technology in a much more encompassing way, which I think it will be positive. It will take learning, but it will be positive. And I think that's the easy part of the conversation. So now I'm gonna throw in, feel free, any one of you. One of the questions we had here is actually from a dear friend, Chris Fortes. Was my junior at Yale, and he made a very specific question. I'm rewarding here, but basically it is, based on what you know already, what are the likely first few careers that will be impacted or eliminated by AI? We're going to have tough questions as well, not only the easy ones.
Yeah. Okay. Of course, all jobs that is repetitive is like that is like you do the same thing every day. Basically, those are the most. And then I see a lot of managers worried because they are just like get information from one side and try to put on the other side, and pretty much AI can do this pretty well. But yeah, those are the first jobs. But let me try to give you a concrete example. So okay, we had some neural networks that we put on production that actually make decisions to allocate logistic people to go to pick up something and deliver in another place. And this used to be like a human being doing this, but through scale, it's impossible because a human being can like control, I don't know, a few hundred people. The AI can control like 300,000 people at the same time and do a better job. So I think maybe a lot of management jobs gonna be like the first strike.
Impacted as well. Yeah.
Computers, I think computers are really better than humans in organizing information and finding patterns. So for example, in my reality, if we take, for example, mid-level associates, like people with a few years of experience in law firms, what they do when clients and companies ask for opinions is that they take a look on the law, they take a look on precedents, they put everything together, and they present a paper, a memorandum with recommendations and suggestions. This can easily be done by a computer. I mean, looking into the law, looking into precedents, putting it together in a language that you can understand, a computer can do it. The computer will not replace a lawyer. In the end of the day, we will always need someone with more experience to take a look and to adjust and to balance the language and to identify the risks and advantages, things like that. But some functions, some jobs, they may disappear.
Constance, if I can, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to pick on one question here that might be part of your area of study. It's from Andrew Smith. His question is, given the huge financial rewards being gained by tech companies, what responsibilities do you feel they owe to society to help navigate the huge tectonic, again quoting you, changes that are about to come? So I think it's something really hot today. We are seeing tech companies that leverage technology in general, AI in particular, with valuations. I'm mixing apples and oranges here, but you already have companies with market value that are bigger than the GDP of many countries, right? I know it's not comparable, but in order of magnitude, it's pretty impressive the leverage that technology is bringing, the amount of wealth that's being created.
Yeah.
Is this something you're looking at? Do you have a view on that?
Yeah, sure. And I mean, there are several responsibilities that come with it, you know, and the one you were alluding to is to sort of the redistribution of wealth, and sort of also the question of who owns the data, you know, and data ownership, where we are, you know, seeing really interesting new models that I think are going to be competing eventually, you know, sort of in terms of how can you tip the scale. So for instance, you know, there is one of the world's largest biobanks, you know, with DNAs and tissues and whatever, you know, sort of profiles of your own health data, you know, sort of they use a model basically that whenever researchers want to access the pool of data, they agree to sharing the results with everyone and redistributing, you know, profits or fees they are paying to those who contributed the data in the first place. And it's Genetic Alliance and Luna DNA is a really interesting company that is basically enabling those who, what I said before, you know, who give data to be stakeholders. But I think the other ethical obligations in terms that come with the use of AI that companies need to look at, you know, or sort of take ownership on, and sort of, and they are, I'm just going to mention a couple of words here. So the ethical implications, for instance, when AIs get out of control, you know, and I'm saying sort of, it could be fake news, or it could be, you know, when you encounter a bias in an algorithm, which leads me to the question I want to hone in on for a second, the question of bias. And how do you ensure that the data that you feed the algorithm with is the right data in the first place? And Marcelo, you were saying to it, like how you trained, you know, your facial recognition software, you had to retrain it because it's mainly been, you know, built up with pictures of white men, which is not going to help you in a society that is very diverse. But it goes into sort of, I think, more critical and, you know, social implications. For instance, when you take predictive sentencing that we heard earlier from Yuri, or predictive policing, you know, when you need to be really careful what data you use. For instance, in the US, when you're Black, you are way more likely to get a harsher sentence. You're 5 times more likely to be stopped for no reason in a traffic stop. You know, you are 2 times more likely to be arrested. So when that is your raw data, of course you build an algorithm on the data that is consistent, but, you know, it's heavily biased against a certain segment of the population in the first place, because the context in which you collected the data is already, you know, socially and racist, let's say, you know, influenced. And what is really interesting here is what I think you guys also said earlier, is you need to bring the community in order to shape the data. You know, there's a really interesting organization in the US, Data for Black Lives, who are doing this and who are bringing, you know, weaving networks of computer scientists, mathematicians, sort of community activists, local change makers, in order to, you know, be more informed and better educated at the point of data gathering and data entry and data interpretation. And so I want to mention it here to throw in another kind of word, you know, sort of bias and ethics that I think we cannot separate, you know, from
in addition to the economics. Perfect. And your comment, it's a perfect lead to the second bulk of our conversation here, which is related to a lot of the questions here. So I'm gonna change a little bit the topic, and then I'll go to the questions just so the audience knows that we're keeping track here, which is precisely, Constance, what you mentioned about the data, the use of data, how we regulate, how we handle this whole new dimension of technology. Well, it has been a while, for a while, but it's now much more relevant and much more explicit. And it's very timely because we have a lot of changes globally. Some happens, you know, PRS in Europe, and things are being adjusted. Other things the problems are being pinpointed, but still no solution or no good solution like use of data to target political campaigns, for one example, that is still lingering, and we have very important elections on the pipeline soon as well. So there's a lot of change, and also this time I'm gonna ask for us to do the opposite, start with Brazil and then go broader. But in Brazil, the last 2 days and probably the next 2 days will be very interesting, because we have the equivalent in Brazil, LGDPA, and this was on and off, Senate blocks, Senate approves. So since this is a hot topic and law related, I'm gonna give you a great favor, José Mauro, and ask you to give an overview of your take on our protection laws, what is good, what is bad, how much clarity we have, and we build from that on a few other questions as well. But
you all have.
I want to steal the thunder, José Mauro. Please tell the crazy story of the last couple of days.
You have noticed that I'm an optimistic person, and I'll try my best to keep optimistic as to this subject here, but it's very difficult. But I'll do my best. So, as Anderson was saying, we do have a new law in Brazil protecting personal data. It's a very good law. It attends the standards of the GDPR, international legislation. I mean, it's quite good. People tend to criticize the fact that Brazil took a long time to create this law, and this is true. But looking by the bright side, Brazil took advantage of all the good experience of other countries to create a legislation that reflects problems that wouldn't exist 10 years ago. So respect to privacy, freedom of expression, innovation, social development, freedom of competition, free initiative. I mean, the law tries to balance all these values and principles. And my feeling is that the law will be very good to the development of innovation in Brazil, and more specifically to AI. I'm very optimistic in this regard. The bad side of it is that the political climate in Brazil is not that good. It's not that stable. And there was a lot of discussion in Brazil as to when the law would come into force. We were expecting the law to come into force in the beginning of this month, in August. And because of COVID and all the problems, the economical problems, there was a provisional measure postponing that the law would come into force next year. And this there was also a change as to the sanctions, to the penalties provided in the law, establishing that they would come into force in August next year. So the Congress divided the law into two parts. The penalties would come into force in August 2021, and the law itself, the principles, the provisions, the rights of data subjects, everything else would come into force in the beginning of 2021. The tricky part is that, as Anderson was saying, since yesterday, everything changed. The Senate decided not to postpone the law for next year, and decided to make the law, to put the law in force right now. So you can imagine the instability that we are having in the country. We are in the middle of a pandemic, as the rest of the world, with serious economical impacts. Companies in general, they were already struggling to be in compliance with the law, because this demands investments, attention, people. So when the Congress postponed the law till next year, some companies decided to invest in other areas and to freeze all the investments in the new legislation. And everything changed, as Anderson was saying, in 2 days. So right now, people are debating what they should do, what will happen, what part of the law will actually be enforced, and what they should do to avoid consequences. And the fact that the Congress divided the law into two parts, the penalties and the law itself, creates a tricky situation, because if the penalties are not applicable, other authorities will start to demand the application of users' rights and other provisions of the law, but the penalties are not applicable. What will happen? So people, my fear is that other legislations in Brazil, they start to be applicable to situations that they should not be applicable. So the privacy law will start its existence in a very fragile way, because it will not be in full force. And maybe when the penalties start to be applicable next year, we will already have precedents enforcing the law based on other legislations and other regulations. And just to complete the mess that we are facing, the whole legal market has pushing the government to create the Brazilian DPO, which is the entity that enforces the legislation, and it happened yesterday. So the situation that we are facing is that the law will come into force immediately or in 15 days, depending on when the president will approve this change in the legislation. And the DPA, the Brazilian entity that will be responsible for organizing the system of data protection, the educational framework, to everything that is necessary to a privacy law like this, is not created there yet. So it's a very challenging moment. I hope that things move fast and the DPA will be in full force as soon as possible, because otherwise we will have a good law, unfortunately, not being properly enforced and not properly observed due to the political climate that we are living in Brazil.
Thank you, José Mauro. It's not an easy way to crack it. Marcelo, if you could talk, just let's assume for a second that the last 30 days didn't happen the way they did, that the law, which is, again, the internet law in Brazil was well written, I hear, and put in force fairly early. And the early comments of our privacy law was also, the review of the law was very good. And I will ask Constance later to comment about globally how it is, but it was considered a good one and not too late. It was, especially among the emerging markets. So Brazil usually has good laws. The application of these laws, even without the complication of this one, which is on, off, sometimes we have good laws, but very hard to enforce, or very long time to enforce. But assuming the regulatory framework is in place, Marcelo, how do you see these in terms of the impact in technology? Does this hurt the adoption of technology? What's your take on having this law enforced?
Okay, so first, I think there's two dimensions in the problem. Let's realize one thing: the owner of the personal data is the end person itself, right? You own your face, you own your voice, it's yours. So this is one thing, and the law is all about make clear to the end user which data you are taking from them and where you're using this data, and giving tools to the end user to be forgotten and to have the data back to them. So when you read the law, you start reshaping all your products to, and this is a principle in Cyberlabs products. It's like, okay, first thing, we never, and we will never sell our tech for public security, because you don't have the opt-in from the end user to be analyzed then in the street, right? So what we do is that the end user own all their data on their mobile phone, and they decide which place can recognize him or not. So they decide which place can use his data or not, and they can actually get out of this place or this database in one click. Because if you come to Brazil and you go in any building, you go there, some person gonna receive you, gonna take a picture of you, gonna take a picture of your documents, and then you're gonna be allowed to go upstairs, right? But after this, you have no idea where your data is going. So this is wrong. And I think this is actually a huge opportunity to make things right and create new products and new services that actually follow this path, that you are concerned about the privacy of the end user and to make everything clear and transparent for them. So we use this, we talk about this a lot, but, and again, we receive a lot of calls from people who wants to do things that we don't agree, and we say no way, because this is something that we don't agree. But there is another aspect, is we need to take care when we're talking about inference using AI as a product, and when we are talking about research. Those are different things. The research to create a neural network needs data, and the access of those data is really important. So you have tools today to guarantee privacy with the access of the data. You have a federated learning, like the data don't need to go out from a central database. You can actually have all the contracts with each companies providing data, and everything is going to stay on those companies who have the opt-in of the user. So I think now that we have new laws, we have new tools, but the pinpoint here is like, you need to make everything clear to the end user. And if the end user has the power to be like, I don't want to be tracked, I don't want to be recognized, this is okay. But maybe there's a lot of people who wants to be tracked, like in health, right? Maybe I want to be tracked. I want to be real. I want to be tracked because I want to know if I'm going to have a heart attack or not. And in security, I want to guarantee that only people who have access to my house can come inside my house and this kind of thing. So again, we should respect the law. If you don't have a company, and I know this from Hein Brand, if you don't have a company that obeying the laws of your country, you should not have a company in that country.
Perfect. Excellent. And in Constance, you talked a little bit about it already. Anything else you would like to add from specifically this application of law? Do you have a perspective of how the world is faring?
I was on mute. I don't know enough about the Brazil context, but from what I'm inferring and hearing from you, it's really interesting in the situation. And I think globally, what we were seeing, what was also said before, the arc is bending towards, more privacy, not less. And at the same time, Marcelo, what you were saying, it's really interesting that the level of, there's also a higher public good, namely research, that needs to rely on data. So can we create this opportunity where we voluntarily submit data into a trusted entity, because the result of that will benefit all of us? One thing I want to add, which I have, sort of been in discussions with some researchers around, so they're thinking, or the thoughts about a personal AI that acts on your behalf and enters, contractual relations with corporate AIs on your behalf, trained on your own data and preferences, which I'm thinking is something really interesting, which would basically, I don't know how oftentimes, there's still an imbalance. I mean, yes, you have GDPR, for instance, but like all the contract parts in 10 pages, I'm not going to read it, right? So in the end, you do make click and you agree to that, hoping it's okay, sort of can we outsource all of this and negotiations about sort of finding the right contractual agreement to, you know, my own personal trusted AI that works on my behalf and is managed by, you know, a fiduciary agent. So Glia.net is a really interesting think tank looking into that. So just wanted to mention that.
This is really cool, and it's part of what we are only starting to scratch the surface, right? It's having an AI representing you, interacting with other entities is really cool. The other thing that it's a second derivative, which is really interesting, is the use of AI to identify biases in AI. All this is very new, and you know, I think most of us here are optimistic on. We are long on it at least, and I think it will be really interesting to see the application of the technology on itself to make it better for everyone. The last topic we have here, we probably have to move a little faster, which is you know, COVID. We are going through a massive global problem that has a lot of implications, not only on, you know, the humanitarian tragedy of the biological problem itself, all the deaths, but all the economic impact, all the changes in culture, flow of people, and so on and so forth. But it has some very interesting cases and situations that came from the fact that it happened now. So obviously, if we could pick, rather not have it ever, but if we had something like this 5 years ago or 10 years ago, it would be completely different than what we are facing today. From the very fact that we are here, having this live conference using Zoom, at the same time that most of the world is working from home, or a big part of it, definitely a big part that was not doing it before. So from the very infrastructure of broadband, resisting all this usage, all the way to being able to use AI commercially in specific cases. So I'll ask now Marcelo to start, because I know firsthand there are interesting cases that Cyberlabs obviously was not designing the tools for that before, but quickly adjusted it and had the impact. So if you could tell a little bit about that, and then José Mauro and Constance as well, if you have good examples or things you would like to share, you know, in the intersection of AI and the pandemic, would be great.
So what we did is, like, we have two platforms, main platforms. One is the counting people to flow and predict how many people are gonna come to your store in the next day or next week. And for that, we had like 4,000 cameras that we're just counting people, right? How many people is per minute over there. And when we saw the pandemic, we actually offered it for free for the governments to say, hey, we can counting people, we can detect agglomeration on the streets. And if you want, you can use it to optimize the way that you're gonna go on the street and say, hey, please go home, don't agglomerate, this kind of thing, don't stay together, blah, 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 don't walk on the beach, this kind of thing. And so we gave for free to governments, and especially in Rio de Janeiro, we had access to all the public cameras. Again, we found identify no one, of course, we didn't have any face recognition on it. It was just counting the number of people and detecting the hot spots. So this made the major and the state work easier and faster. So it was good. In the other platform, which is the Key app, we attach a thermal camera to the totem that people use to be recognized and open the doors. And so we were already contactless. So you don't need to have anything, any key to get inside your building. But now we use a thermal camera, so you can detect your temperature. And those are like the two movements we did really fast because we realized that was like important. But I think was really a good experience to work with the government and just giving the technology, right? There was no money involved. It was just like, let's try to make things better for the population. And it really worked out. I think it was in the case of Brazil, it happened a lot of states in this way.
Anything? Go ahead, Leon.
Sorry, Anderson. One good thing about this whole situation, which is really difficult, is what Marcelo pointed out. I mean, people offer technologies and solutions and innovations to help governments and to help people to be better off, to try to overcome the problems that they have on a daily basis. So it's really interesting. But I want to take one point that Constance mentioned, which is the bias of algorithms, which also appeared during the pandemic. For example, the British government, because the difficulty of applying tests to students, created an algorithm to try to determine the grades to certain students that would take the tests to go to university. So instead of taking tests, there would be an algorithm taking into consideration several aspects, several parameters in order to determine what grades the student should receive. And machines, they don't know what they are doing, right? You put the data and there they provide the result as you wish. And in this case, the government noticed that students that would be in neighborhoods with better quality of life and people that earn more money and smaller classes, the algorithm, for some reason that led to this, they would receive higher grades. And on the other hand, people that would be in less fortunate neighborhoods and larger classes, because of the parameters used in the algorithm, they would receive lower grades. The government noticed that, took a step back, and decided to evaluate the students in a different way. And I think this emphasizes how we need people and society working together with these technologies in order to make them meet what society needs. Because otherwise, we can create situations that will be very bad. And in this case, they have identified, and it's good that nobody suffered any disadvantage because of the use of the algorithm. But it really called my attention how something that was designed to be good and made all sense to have an algorithm in a situation like this, in which people cannot go and take a test in school, and the result was not that good. So I just wanted to point out this example that was very interesting.
Yeah, it's a fantastic illustration, right? And similar, I've read about the case also, and also here healthcare algorithms and healthcare data in the U.S. has also proven to be similarly biased, you know, along racial lines very often here during the pandemic. So, you know, in the end, people, it's us who input data and who interpret the world. And so that gets mirrored in the technology that we build, right? Which also what made me answer, there's one question here on the chat. Do you believe in a futuristic society where AI, I think it should read, will rule everything and everyone? If yes, when is this going to happen? That sounds terrifying to me, you know, and I don't know whether you agree or disagree, but one aspect just to throw in here is also that machines thus far don't manage is the question of empathy, you know, and the question of you know, putting yourself into other people's shoes and seeing the complexity of the, you know, the things that are not encoded in data. So I still feel I don't want that stage, and I don't want that stage for my children. But I don't know. I see, so Marcelo perhaps thinking differently.
My gosh, guys, I see the bright side, right? I think that humans need to be more humans and let the machine do things that humans was not supposed to do. I think that we should evolve as a society. I think we should be concerned about, like, the doctor should talk more to patients and not be like, you know, analyzing data. Let's let the machine analyze the data and let the doctor talk to a patient. And this is real. Like the artists should be doing more music and more painting and if you talk about, again, if you talk about the education, we're gonna revolutionize education in the world. We're gonna be able to deliver education to places that don't have quality education. I can actually put Albert Einstein teaching physics in Portuguese or in English or in any language to a child in the middle of the jungle if I want to. Like the video of Albert Einstein, I can do this right today. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about the opportunities that we are facing, because nobody gonna, this is a trend, like this is a movement, a world movement. There's gonna be like people who are gonna be concerned and gonna be behind. There's gonna be people that will be understanding what's happening and gonna be like on the edge of these new opportunities. So I see the bright sides. Yeah.
Yeah. So
yes.
Let me take that point, Marcelo. We are approaching the end here. I'm gonna make one last question to the three of you, and then hand over to Margarise for wrapping up our presentation here. So from my side already, thank you so much for your contributions here today. And the last question is a little bit of a challenge and picking on the optimistic side of the three of you. So we talked a lot about problems and challenges and so on, but for now, for us to wrap up in a very positive light, I would like each of you, and let's start with you, Constance, pick one very positive impact that, assuming we do our job correctly, we as a human race, we fix the problems and so on, but knowing what we know today, what do you think could be great about, you know, in a decade or more, that AI will bring to us all as a human race? Any dimension that you see fit, but one really cool thing that could happen if everything goes right.
Yeah, for me individually, what I'm most excited about are the advances and the opportunities in healthcare and individualized health, that, you know, we will just understand our body at a totally different, you know, level, and so many beliefs we have had will be thrown overboard because the machine will be able to read out, you know, data at a level of detail that we are not yet aware of. And I think this opens up huge opportunities. So personally, that's what I'm most interested in.
Fantastic. Jose Mauro?
I just wanted to say that it's a great time to be alive, you know, this revolution going on in front of our eyes. We are seeing a lot of things that would be impossible a few years ago. We would watch a movie with a person looking into an image in the telephone and it seemed impossible. And today, this is, look, we are talking to each other in different parts of the world with no problems at all. So I think that people will merge with machines each time more in the good way. So as Constance was saying, healthcare will be improved. People will live much more. People will have more free time, maybe to work less, to have more time to hobbies and to take care of children. And technology can provide this. It will be a bumpy ride because we will have some problems, as you said, with jobs, and we'll have to take care of how to calibrate algorithms to avoid inequality and that people suffer. But in the end of the day, it's a great moment for humanity. I mean, it's such a fantastic progress in such a short time. So I just wanted to say that it's a lot of good things are to come, and I think it will be great to be present for this.
Fantastic. Marcelo?
Oh, so I think I just mentioned, but I think we're going to improve as a society as a whole, right? We're going to democratize a lot of things, because we're going to be able to deliver good health to a lot of people, good education to a lot of people. We're going to have superhuman powers finally to identify the people who needs helps and go to the right places. And so when you're young and you see magic, this is magic, my friend. This is the real magic. It's technology, right? And we can do it. We know how to do it. It's there. So it's just let's not be scared. Let's embrace. It's gonna be really good the next years to come. That's my final thoughts.
Fantastic. Once again, thank you all so much. It was really, really good. Margarise, if you can wrap it up for us, it would be great. And thanks again for the opportunity to be here.
I love that all of you wrap up in a very positive thinking. Thank you so much. This was amazing. I really appreciate you being part of our webinar today and help BayBrazil to celebrate our 10-year anniversary with this fascinating discussion. Constance, thank you so much for joining us. I'm a fan of Ashoka, and I'm very happy that you were able to join us.
Thank you,
Marcelo. Much success. It's great what you are building, and go out there, continue to do the great work. Much success to you and Cyberlabs. José Mauro, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to work with you, Rafael, and all the Pinheiro Neto team. Great to have you in this conversation. And Anderson, last but not least, muito obrigada. It's been great to work with you and having you to lead this discussion with very provocative insights. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye,
and
everyone.
For those of you joining us at Zoom and Facebook, thank you so much. Muito obrigada. Our last webinar in our conference program is coming up on September 10. We are also wrapping up in a positive way. We are going to be discussing tech for good, highlighting some of the silver linings of the pandemic. Fred Aslan, Amit Garg, Vicente Silveira, and some other guest speakers will be with us talking about that. And this conversation, for those of you who join in the middle, will be available in our YouTube channel. Muito obrigada. Thank you.